motif, M-O-T-I-F. And this is not a definition, but the definition, it's a recurring element in a piece of fiction that helps develop the theme, right? So, for instance, it says here in, this should be italicized, but in the novel Huck Finn, Huck is constantly in conflict with the civilized world. This conflict becomes a motif. So you could have a more simple motif, like, for instance, in the novel Candide by Voltaire, a French novel, there's tears all the way through. Tears recurs all the time, and that's a motif. It helps develop the theme. So motif is a recurring element. So another term that is going to be on the exam that you need to know, epithet. It's a word or phrase used in place of a person's name, which is characteristic of that person. So it's, here I could even state it a different way. An epithet is a nickname that expresses a person's qualities. So if you want to write it down more simply that way. A nickname that expresses someone's qualities, like Alexander the Great. We know he's great. Madonna, material girl. She's very materialistic. Ms. Know-It-All. We see her qualities through that name. So those are epithets. Let's see if there's something else on here that you need to know. You don't already know? Yes. We have some very good examples here, but I need to give you the definitions first. So I'm going to come back to this, and we'll go to another sheet. All right, a euphemism. Euphemism. It is, here's the definition, but I can make it a simpler definition after I read it to you. Substitution of an agreeable, or at least not offensive expression for one whose plainer meaning might be harsh or unpleasant. So it's substituting a softer expression for a harsher expression. For instance, instead of saying he croaked, which would be very vulgar, you could say he passed away. He passed away is euphemistic, right? So, you need to know that term, euphemism. Lightities. All right, what is understatement first? Understatement just means downplaying something in order to emphasize it. It sounds inverse and paradoxical, but when you downplay something, and we know you are, then we know there's something important about it. I wasn't bothered at all by that. You're kind of downplaying it, but we know you were. Now, a type of understatement is lightities, and that is mainly this part of the definition is important. Denying the contrary of the thing being affirmed. Denying the contrary of the thing being affirmed. These are not this one is a good example here. A few unannounced quizzes are not inconceivable. A few unannounced quizzes are not inconceivable. I'm telling you that they will happen because I have two negatives that makes it a positive, but not and in. This is prefix means not, and this is not. So using two negatives together is really the idea of lightities, right? It's a type of understatement. Let's see if there's more terms here that you need. Yes, you need this one. Metonymy. It's using an alternate term instead of the one we normally think about. Substitution of one word for another, sort of, but using an alternate term to the normal one. So, normally we would say, by your work, you will survive. But instead of saying work, we're saying sweat of thy brow. And eat thy bread instead of survive. Man of the cloth, that means someone who's a religious, religiously ordained. Okay? Man of the cloth. We'll see some other examples later, but those are okay. Let's see if there's anything else on here you need. Synecdoche. This word looks difficult to pronounce. It's probably Greek in origin. Synecdoche. Synecdoche. It's substituting a part for the whole is usually the definition we want. Substituting a part for the whole. So, it's not the best example here. We'll look at more. I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas. Claws don't scuttle by themselves. They're part of a crab or some other creature, all right? So when we disembody a part of something and just refer to that part, that's synecdoche. And zeugma. That might have been in your book in the Kennedy inaugural, but in any case, when you have two or more different words linked to one pivot word, all right, we're going to look at some examples. But usually it's a verb or one adjective, and off of that one verb comes at least two, maybe more words, and they're all normally expected, and one's a little odd. Or they can be referring to an adjective, and one's a little odd. But we will look at an example, right? So, let's go back to our other sheet. So I'm going to start at the bottom here. Right. So here we have an example of metonymy. The sailors drank a glass of hearty red. This means wine. So it's the alternate way of referring to something than the norm. It's metonymy. Right? Let's look at another. Synecdoche. We have several examples in this sentence. If I had some wheels, that means a car. I'd put on my best threads, that means clothes. And ask for Jane's hand. No, I really want Jane, not just her hand. So parts representing the whole. Okay? Zeugma coming up here. He grabbed his hat from the rack by the stairs. And see, here's my verb. Here's my direct object, hat, kiss. I have two words going back to the same verb. They're both direct objects. I grabbed a hat, or he grabbed a hat, and a kiss. Kiss is a little, you don't think normally of grabbing a kiss after you refer to an object. He smashed the clock into bits and his fist through the wall. A verb with a direct object. This one's not expected. Fred excelled at sports. Harvey excelled at eating. Tim excelled with girls. So excelled would be our common verb, right? So those are zeugmas. Okay, so we have already looked at that. Now, if we have time, yes, this is going to be very helpful because on the exam, now I'm moving away from terminology, though actually there are a few more terms you do need to know. You need to know the term parody, P-A-R-O-D-Y, parody. A parody is if you think of the movie Airplane or Scary Movie, those are making fun of a genre or another type of movie, like a disaster movie for Airplane. So it's not serious. So parody is a humorous remaking or a humorous type of another genre. So that's a parody. And satire think you need to, S-A-T-I-R-E, you need to know that term. And that would be finding fault with something in order to improve it. So, a modest proposal that you studied earlier in the year, did you? By Jonathan Swift, that is a satire. It's not a parody, it's not finding a different, using a form but using it in a humorous way. But it is finding fault with something in society in order to improve it. So that's satire. Now, let's go to this. Let's see what kind of time I have. Oh, good. We have time. I'm only going to do a couple examples here, but you're going to see something quite like this on the exam. And you have to really think on these. So, I give you 2 sentences. And I give you 3 options, even though they're not numbered here, but there are 3 options of how can you combine these. So we think back to our rules for combining independent clauses. Well, we can add a conjunction, a comma and a conjunction. We can have a semicolon, a conjunctive adverb, and a comma. We can have a period like this. We can just have a semicolon in lowercase. But there's more to these questions. You have to see how they're related, idea-wise. Is one similar to the other? And then you would never use the conjunction but, because that shows difference. Is one showing a contrast to the other? Well, then you could use however, or but, or yet. Or is one cause-effect causing the other one? Then you would use a conjunction that would show that, like consequently. So we have to think about what word would be best to connect them based on the ideas that they represent and also how to punctuate. For instance now, we have wolves were once part of the landscape in many western states. They were killed off in the 20th century. So in our minds we would say, okay, it was like this, it's not like this anymore. So these are opposites, or they're different anyway. So I'm trying to join the clauses with a comma. No, that's a comma splice run-on. That is not acceptable. You can't join independent clauses with a comma. It's a run-on. I can use a comma with a coordinating conjunction, so I do have that there, and it does show contrast. Wolves were once part of the landscape when they were killed off. It doesn't quite make sense that this is happening when they were killed off. So this is the better idea, all right? Just showing that they're in contrast and it is punctuated correctly. Let's look at these 2 and see how should we join them. Wild wolves from Canada were released in Montana and Wyoming in the mid-1990s. Many people were pleased to have wolves back in the western United States. Are they opposites? No. It's really cause-effect, so let's see if any of our word choices, conjunctions are that way. When wild wolves from Canada were released, blah, 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 many people were pleased. This is a subordinate clause, and so we're not looking for run-ons because we're not joining 2 independent clauses, so you can't have a run-on, but what should we have here? A comma. It's not a run-on if you don't, but it's preferable to have it after the subordinate clause. Wild wolves were released, and many people were pleased. I have an independent and an independent, but I have a run-on because there's no comma. When these were released, comma. So this is my best choice. So let's look at maybe one more. The wolves were endangered. Hunting them was illegal. And the idea is wolves were endangered, so hunting was illegal. And as a result, it's sort of consequently cause-effect. So let's look for something along those lines. Now, what are we given here? If I use so, it's a coordinating conjunction, I must have a comma. I don't have it. When I'm joining independent clauses with a conjunctive adverb, I must have this type of punctuation. So this is my best choice. Therefore, isn't supposed to have commas around it when it joins independent clauses.